Thank you very much for doing this.
Pleasure.
I wanted to approach this, if I may, as sort of a this is your life, as opposed to just focusing only on the current project, which we will certainly do, but
Okay.
just from the beginning, for the record, where were you born and raised?
I was born in a town called Perth, and I was raised in a town called Crieff in Scotland, in Perthshire, which is right in the middle of Scotland. It's north of Edinburgh and Glasgow, and it's in the middle just before the Highlands start. It's very beautiful.
And did you go to the movies a lot as a kid? And if you did,
Yeah.
were there any favorites or influences?
Yeah, I did. We used to go. We had back then there were small. They were all independent cinemas. So Crieff had a cinema, you know, as most small towns did, I guess, in the country in Britain. And we would go every Saturday afternoon. It was a real routine ritual, and they would always play a kids' film on a Saturday afternoon. And there would be B movies beforehand, you know, short, serialized usually. There was one called. There was one about some pepper pot or shrinking, some person that shrank. There were always like they probably replayed old classic serialized shorts. I don't know. I remember Harold Lloyd. They would play Harold Lloyd shorts, and always with a cliffhanger at the end. So you'd have to go back the next week to see what happened. I mean, my first recollection of cinema back when I was a kid was one of my first big memories was. Funny enough, seeing the Star Wars movie. My uncle was in the first 3 Star Wars films, Dennis Lawson, and we went to, when I was 6, I think the first one came out. You know, we were picked up from school, my brother and I, and taken to see the first Star Wars movie in the cinema in, I think, Perth or Glasgow. And we were excited to see my uncle. You know, we'd never seen him on the big screen before. But as well as being excited about that, then we saw Star Wars. The first time was pretty full on. So that was my first memory, and then there was another memory I have very clearly of being. We were on a Saturday afternoon in the cinema in Crieff watching Death on the Nile, a classic kind of British whodunit, Agatha Christie whodunit movie, and I fell very deeply in love with the actress who played the lead in it, and then she was shot in the head, and it was, you know, I've seen it since, of course. It was just a little bit of makeup here. But I was maybe 9 or 10 or something, I was horrified. I was really upset because I loved her and she was dead. But I turned that into I went home and I was like crying to my mum saying, I shouldn't be allowed to see that, it's ridiculous, it was so disgusting. You know? It was like someone had burnt a cork and gone like that in her head. That's what it looked like, really, when you see it now.
That's so funny. Well, you mentioned your uncle Dennis Lawson. I just have gathered from looking at other interviews that you've given that he was really a big influence on you.
Yeah.
Can you talk about just why you looked up to him so much?
I mean, at first when I was really little, he was just very different from all I grew up in a very small town, Crieff. It's a beautiful place. It's a very conservative little town. It was an old market town. There's a lot of farming there, and it's right in the middle of Scotland. There's something quite conservative about it. And my uncle would come, it was an actor, and in London, he lived in London, and so he would come back in the 70s, you know, wearing beads and sheepskin waistcoats and no shoes, and long hair and big long moustaches and stuff. He was a hippie, you know. And like he was in a production of Hair in Amsterdam in the late 60s, you know, or 70s maybe. He was just an amazing character. So at first I was just really blown up. I was just in awe of him, really, because he represented something very different from what I was surrounded by there. And I always wanted to be an actor. I think right from when I was just tiny, because I wanted to be like him. Mm-hmm. And then my path was about, you know, I never wavered from that. I still always wanted to be an actor, but I had to figure out what it meant. And he was instrumental in that with me. I mean, he worked with me on my audition speeches to get into drama school when I was 16, and you know, I remember when I got my first job, I left drama school early to do a long TV series, 6-part TV special called Lipstick on Your Collar.
Yeah.
And before it, the night before it, you know, he met, you know, I went to his house and he sort of gave me a technical masterclass on what to expect on set, and that's something you never learn at drama school. about hitting marks and cheating eye lines and what the different jobs will be, who will be on the set, what a grip is, what a dolly grip is, you know, what just so I walked on set knowing a little bit of what to expect, I guess. And
between Lipstick on Your Collar and Scarlet and Black, both 1993, both very well received TV. Did that sort of, did you feel those were the things that catapulted you into a different level of standing in the industry, or?
Well, I wasn't in the industry before. I mean, I was a drama student. I mean, I left home when I was 16 to do a theatre arts course in Fife in Scotland, which is a different region from where I was brought up. So I sort of left home, and then I went to the next year I was in London I got into a 3-year acting course in London, and I was doing that, and then I left to do Lipstick on Your Collar, and I left early. You know, I got the job while I was still in my final year, and I left, and so I was off to a flying start in that regard, but I probably had to wait 6 months till it came out, and I remember feeling that counting the days till it came on television, thinking that my life would change, and of course it doesn't really.
It doesn't?
Well, not really, no, because your life's changed by making it, you know. And when it comes on TV, it was received very well, or wasn't received probably as well as Dennis Potter's other work, like Singing Detective and Pennies from Heaven. But then I went off to do Scarlet and the Black. I did a play. I did my first I spent a lot of time training in the theatre, and I did my first professional play outside of London, and then did Scarlet and the Black, which was the first sort of TV full-on lead. It was a proper sort of romantic lead.
And so, just a year after the Lipstick on Your Collar and Scarlet and Black was your film debut.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me like the first one, I believe, was Shallow Grave with Danny Boyle.
Yeah.
And actually, all the 3 films that you guys did together, that, Trainspotting, A Life Less Ordinary, all among your first films, within the first few years. I just wonder, they were, again, I think really, people really embraced them, particularly probably Trainspotting, but just, what is it about, how did you guys first cross paths, and why do you think that you brought out, really the best or near it in each other? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's something I don't know that you can really explain. There was a very strong connection that I can only speak for myself, that I felt about Danny. He was my first movie director. We made Shallow Grave together, like you say. It was my first film, his first film, the producer's first film, Andrew MacDonald, the writer's first film, John Hodge, and it was something good and new and different. And when people saw it in British cinema, it was a real turning point. People went, "Wow, okay, this is new and different," and it was clever and it looked amazing, and it made a mark in that respect. And so when we went on to do Trainspotting, there was an expectation. I was thrilled because I just thought that this is who I am as an actor. I mean, all through that period until after Life Less Ordinary, that was who I was. For me, as an actor, I was Danny Boyle's actor, and I felt like I was that, being part of that, although I wasn't officially part of that company, being part of that company, creative company, was who I was as an actor and what I stood for, and what and I felt like I was involved in something that was making change, and it was incredible time. And what, because I agree with you, I think he got the best out of me, and there was some really close connection between a director and an actor, which has sort of set the bar for me in terms of what that relationship can be, and what it very often isn't, sadly. It very often doesn't meet that kind of high standard of trust and creative collaboration, where really he could have asked me to do absolutely anything and I would have done it and made it work, There was something very special about that. And it ended sadly. It was a shame. It's something that came to a close after Life Less Ordinary, and it's never returned, and it's a great shame. I've always missed what we might have gone on to do, Who knows?
Well, I was going to ask you. I mean, it's been 15 years, but you guys are
Yeah.
both still very active. Is there a chance you'll work together again?
I've got no idea.
Yeah.
I mean,
Would you like to?
I'd love to. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, so as far as Train Spotting, just because I think as that was the one internationally that maybe put you on the map the most initially, it seems like you totally committed to that part to the extent that not only did you lose all that weight and everything else, but I had read one thing, I think, where there were, not everything is accurate, but that you had you were so committed that you were prepared to try heroin just to see what it was like. So can you just talk about that particular experience? Because that's the one that I think when people decades from now write, the story of Ewan McGregor, that's where for a lot of them it begins.
Yeah. I just was so completely. There's only a few times in your life that you're ever going to sit down and read a leading role like that, and I wasn't offered it. They were always very sketchy with the casting, Danny and Andrew. They would give me, after Shallow Grave, they gave me Train Spotting to read when we were in Sundance with Shallow Grave. It was green lit by Channel 4 when we were in Sundance. I guess after its reception there. And they gave it to me and they said, "We're not offering you this. It's not an offer. We just want to know what you think." I was like, okay. So I was pleased that they'd asked me to read it, and I read it, and there's only a handful of times in my life that I felt like that after finishing a script, where you just can't accept the fact that you want to play that part. And I don't think Danny was. I know, in fact, in retrospect, I know that Andrew, the writer, John Hodge, the writer, because he's told me, didn't think that I was the right person for Renton. Renton in the book is really spotty and he's covered in boils, red hair. He's a really unfortunate looking guy. He's not. John didn't think I was the right person. He told me that after, and then qualified it quickly by saying that I proved him wrong, which was nice. Yeah. But when you read a part like that, I stopped eating really. I started eating so that I would lose weight. I had to prove to Danny that I was the right person, and I didn't see him for some time. And then I went into their office in Soho in London, Andrew's office at the time, I remember, and met him. And by that time I'd lost quite a lot of weight. I was quite gaunt looking, and I had quite long hair. And I think Danny, if I'm right in thinking, Danny at that point saw that it could work and that I was committed to it. And it was on that day that I went off and cut my hair. I said, I think he should be like a skinhead or something. He wasn't in the book, but I just thought it would work really well like that, and it did.
It did.
So I went around the corners, cut all my hair off, and came back, and they went, "Oh, right, okay."
Well, it all worked great, and
I mean, we didn't try heroin in the end. There was a time when because I had never done heroin, and I thought, well, I've got to portray this guy that's the biggest thing in his life is his addiction to heroin, and it's like his lover and his parents, and it's everything to him, and yeah, I've never done it, so I thought about it, and I thought, well, John's a doctor, the writer, so he could administer it, and I thought maybe Danny and I had all planned out. We get a hotel room. John could administer the heroin so that we wouldn't die, and we would know what it was like to make the film. But we started working with real heroin addicts in Glasgow. We worked with a group called the Carlton Athletic Club that were a recovery group, and they were incredible people, and they were hard Glasgow men and women who'd been at the bottom of, but right at the bottom of what life has to offer. Like many of them living in the streets, losing all of their friends, all of their family. They all spoke with great shame about how base and low their lives had become on that drug. And it was immediately apparent that if we were to do that, if we were to go and have our pseudo heroin experience in a hotel room, it would be enormously disrespectful to those people. And so we didn't. And like many things in my profession, what I did was just act it. And I acted it by speaking to a lot of people that had been on heroin and trying to get them to describe what it was like to withdraw from heroin. And I saw people who were in the midst of that withdrawal anyway in some of their meetings, the Carlton Athletic Club meetings. There was a kid I saw one day who was 3 days 3 days clean of heroin, and his eyes looked like he was in absolute hell, you know, torment. And that's what you have to do in acting. You don't have to. You don't have to experience everything. That's why we have an imagination, I guess.
I'm sure that those 3 films, films you made with Danny Boyle, but particularly Trainspotting, brought you a greater level of fame and recognition than you'd had before. But I guess the one that would have really kicked it to a whole nother level would have been when you signed up to do Star Wars. And I just wonder, for you, how did you come to play that part? And signing up for it, was there any concern that, I mean, any anonymity that you might have still had was going to be gone after you associate yourself with a franchise like that, you know? So
I wasn't worried about the anonymity side of things, because already in Britain I was recognised on the streets for Shallow Grave and Trainspotting, and the big decision about Star Wars for me, and it was something that I sort of really considered properly, was the kind of actor I was, and what I felt I stood for, which was a real sort of independent. All my work had quite a lot of edge in it, in one way or another. I worked with Greenaway on the Pillow Book. You know, I did a Velvet Goldmine. I did quite. I was attracted to work that was risky and different and edgy, I suppose. I still am, luckily. But at that point, I thought that this isn't really me, and what will it mean? And if it means that, you know, the worry about a film of that scale is that you don't survive it in a way. You don't survive the hype, and you don't survive. You know, become typecast, or, you know. Harrison Ford did all right after Star Wars films, but he was sort of alone, really. And so you have to consider that. I mean, I don't mean any disrespect to Carrie or Mark Hamill, but there's an element of, you know, that the film is so huge that. So anyway, that was something that I really considered. But more than anything, it was about who I was and what I stood for as an actor. And was it right? Should I, you know, am I selling out? Am I? But the closer I got to it, I read for it, and then I went back for another sort of on-camera audition, and then I think the third one was like the final one, and by that time I knew it was just me and one other actor. And I'd taken advice from everyone. I'd phoned Danny, I'd spoken to my uncle, who told me, don't do it, you're crazy, don't. He said, if you want a career after you're 30, don't do it. And I disregarded his advice in the end, because the nearer I got to it, the more I wanted to do it. And then when I finally did go, I think the last, I can't remember if the last edition was actually up where we shot it, but I remember either just before I got the job or when I got the job, walking around with George, and he showed me around the studios, and he was showing me all the stuff they were building, and part of the first one that we made, it was in this kind of submarine thing, me, Liam and Jar Jar in the back. No, it was me, Jar Jar and Liam in the back. And they were building this huge submarine, you know, and you could see the shape of it, and they were putting the Perspex dome on it, and I got really excited, and I went, will we go underwater in it? And he looked at me like I was nuts, and he went, it's none of it real, you know, and I went, oh yeah. And that's sort of, sadly, part of the experience of making a film like that is you get behind the curtain, you know, you get backstage on something like Star Wars, which is all about our belief in this other galaxy, this other world, and he creates it so well, George, that we really want to believe in it, and I wanted to believe we'd be under the sea in this polystyrene submarine.
So in hindsight, was it what was the impact after, you know, what you had been warned about? Did it come true? Did it make things harder for a while?
I don't know, when they came out, I always treated them like films amongst all the other films I made, and there seemed to be some sort of element of, well, you belong to Star Wars for the 10 years or however long it was that we made the 3 that we made. But the truth is, for the actor, you know, you do 4 months on one film, and we came back and did 2 or 3 weeks reshoots, maybe 6 months later, and we did that 3 times, and in between times I made a lot of other films, and to me they were in the long list of films that I made. and the impact, I don't know what the impact. I just made sure. I just kept working. I just kept working because that's what I like to do. So I don't know what the impact was. I mean, it didn't do me any harm.
No. Well, just one last thing about that was that I thought it was interesting. You, from what I gathered, really went to great effort to study Alec Guinness the way he had played the part, so that where some might try to put a different stamp on it, but you seemed like you were very committed to the idea that there should be some continuity.
Yeah, there had to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I was playing him as a young man, and so therefore I have to become Alec Guinness, and so I did the best I could at that. I watched actually a lot of his early work because I was playing him as a young man. I watched quite a lot of his early stuff when he was a young man, and I found some real gems. There's a beautiful film called The Card that he made in maybe the 30s, 40s maybe. A fantastic, odd story about he has a cart and a donkey, and he has a job in this little town, but he ends up by the end of the film he's the mayor, and it was just a wonderful, odd performance he gave. I mean, the truth is that a lot of his performances when he was young were really of their time, and all delivered in a very clipped RP, very camp accent. That was the kind of order of the day in the theatre. So it wasn't that useful, other than seeing his spirit, And I tried to do that. I tried to sound like him. It's not easy because his voice in the Star Wars story, his voice at all, when he was older, we associate entirely with that famous, iconic old man with the beard, and so to try and use that voice as a young man was difficult, especially when you're fighting or flying a spaceship or doing something exciting, and then trying to sound like Alec. It was quite difficult to do.
So you talked about how during those years that Star Wars was going on, you were very active in other things, and I think the one that early in that process that really connected in a huge way, I wonder if you even had any sense that it was Moulin Rouge. And I actually have also read, a lot of people were surprised to see you singing, but that's something you've always enjoyed doing. I've heard about these Elvis impersonations, all these other. So just for you, when was it? Was it clear all along that Moulin Rouge was going to be something special, or was it just a chance to work with Baz or Nicole?
Yeah.
Or
I never doubted it for a minute. I mean, I felt like from the moment I met Baz I auditioned for him for Romeo and Juliet, and I think my audition for that film got me Moulin Rouge. He makes it his business to go around the world and audition in New York and London and LA and Australia and Sydney and Melbourne. I mean, he really makes it his business to find out who's around and works. When you audition with him, you work with him for 3-4 hours. He really gets a sense of who's around, who's exciting and who's new in the world. And so for my audition with him for Romeo and Juliet, we worked for quite a long time on the text, and I really enjoyed it, even though I didn't get cast in it. I got quite a lot out of working with him for those 3-4 hours. And he remembered it, I guess. So when it came to cast Moulin Rouge, he asked to see me, and I was doing a play in London at the time called Little Malcolm and the Struggle Against the Eunuchs. And I had a huge beard and a long hair, and I had no voice because I'd been on stage every night. And at that time I was drinking and smoking too much, and I blew my voice out. So I was trying my best to kind of wheeze my way through the play at night. And I'm surprised people didn't really ask for their money back, actually. But that in the midst of all this, he wanted me to audition for Moulin Rouge, so I met him, and I was like, all right, Baz, nice to see you again. How's it going? And he asked me to sing, and I went, well, I'll have a go, but he had to sort of, I couldn't sing really, but I mean, because of my voice, but I guess he felt that I could, or he knew that I could, or I told him I could, and I'm not sure if I was able to sing for him another time when my voice was better, I can't remember, but anyway, I got the job, and thank God, and I never doubted that it wouldn't work. Right from then, I mean, I was just so absolutely convinced, because of his two movies at that point, Strictly Ballroom and Romeo and Juliet. I knew that he was an amazing director. I knew that he had this style, the red curtain style. He had a vision. He was a visionary filmmaker, and I never for a minute doubted that it wouldn't work. Even, I mean, while we were making it, you know, it's absolutely blind confidence that it was going to just take the world by storm.
Which is amazing because there really hadn't. I mean, Chicago was the next year. Prior to that, their musicals had been gone for decades, really.
Yeah.
But you guys brought it back.
Didn't feel I'd ever. I think I went to see the Rushes. I don't watch Rushes when I make a film. I went to see them only once, and that was the first we shot. The first musical sequence that I shot was was Your Song, in the elephant up in the elephant, and there's that one shot where I've got my back to Nicole and I break into song, and it was the first time that I'd done it on set. We'd been singing we were out there rehearsing for 4 months, I think. So for us to sing to each other was as natural as speaking to each other by that point. It was absolutely seamless, as it needed to be. There was never a moment of embarrassment, as you might imagine there would be when you break into song. Or it was second nature. But I went to see that one set of Rushes just to see if it worked, and I saw it did, and that was it. I went. I thought, yeah, of course it works. Why wouldn't it?
Well, the last thing before I ask you about The Impossible is I just want, it's amazing how prolific you have been since you started. I mean, basically, not only in film, but theater, everything. It's sort of the anti-Daniel Day-Lewis, which is nothing against Daniel. Both work. I mean, they're both amazing. Well, you guys have both done great, but it's just amazing how consistently you have been putting out great stuff. And so if we can just get your any memory or something that stands out about a few of these highlights of the last few years leading up to The Impossible. One has to be Black Hawk Down.
Yeah.
Just the first, don't feel that you have to...
No, I love Black Hawk Down. I loved the way that Ridley, how clever he is as a filmmaker, and he sent us off to a sort of boot camp in Fort Benning in Georgia with the real Rangers. All the Rangers went there, all the Delta guys went to where the Delta guys train. It's very hush-hush, we don't know, even if they do, we don't know if they exist, but the Rangers do, and we went to train with them. And so for a week we were sort of taught Ranger type stuff. I mean, what you can learn in a bunch of actors in a week. But they kicked our ass a little bit, we did a lot of running around and stuff. But the most important thing they taught us was how to move down the street when you were under fire. And that's what mainly we were doing in that film. And when it came to doing that first when we fast rolled down from the helicopters and then we spread out in the street and then we have to move, we knew how to do that because we'd been taught by the Rangers themselves, and we had a Ranger with us, a real soldier with us who'd been there on the day, who was our advisor. And Ridley would set up these huge wide shots. There'd be cameras wherever. There were so many of them you didn't know where they were really. And he would say, okay, you want to start here and I want you to end up over there. Okay, and he'd go back to his tent, and he'd go, okay. So we would try, we left to work it out on our own, and then they would shout action, and shit would blow up, and the first few takes, Somali and extras would run out and fire guns at us, and we would take aim and shoot them, and sometimes they would fall down, and you'd go, you weren't quite sure whether you'd actually just killed someone or not. It was so realistic, and then he would shout cut, and luckily all the Somali extras would stand up again. And but it felt so real,
right.
And it gave you absolutely it's what gave that film its kind of the stressful energy at the heart of that film, was because we were all in that sort of we weren't in any danger, but we were in a heightened situation there with that he created that made it real.
Big Fish, people still, I run into people quite often who say it's one of their, if not their favorite movie. Yeah.
Well, it's a beautiful film, Big Fish. I think it touches the heart of a lot for men about, their fathers, and fathers about their sons, and all of us about our lives and how we remember things and our fantasy and how those two things can kind of mold together and so our memories can become sort of more fantastical than they ever were in reality. There's something very beautiful about it, and it's absolutely Tim Burton at his best, really. I think there's something. I love very much working with him. I would love to do so again. I liked his. He's got a great impatience in waiting for technical things to be set up. He pulls his hair out waiting for tracks to be laid and stuff. But as soon as they are, when we start shooting the scene, he's absolutely focused and calm. And I noticed quite early on that there was something new and different about this experience, and I realised that it was that period of when he said action to when he said cut was very stress-free. There was just a time for playing, and then he cast actors that would play in front of the lens, and I loved it. I love creating those kind of moments that when I was the soldier, and there's a funny moment where I go into a room and turn the light out, and you hear me beating up these people, you don't see it, and the light goes back on again. I just loved all that kind of classic filmmaking that his sense of filmmaking, and I loved it. I thought it was a very special film.
An underappreciated, I think, gem by another unique director would be The Ghostwriter. And that one, I don't think you got the attention you deserved. That was terrific. So just ask you about that.
Yeah, I don't know if it was I mean, people like The Ghostwriter. I think it was a difficult. Obviously, it was a difficult time for that film to come out because of what was going on in Roman Polanski's life at the time. And here in America at that time, it was an unfortunate collide of this great film that he made, coming out with his court case and what was happening at the moment. So that impacted it for sure. But it's a great film, and in terms of working with some of the world's greatest directors, there was one of them.
Yeah. And
he's an amazing director. He pushes you very hard. He's tough on everybody to excel and to do the best work they can, and for me that was very much about finding the absolute truth of those for that character, putting him absolutely in those moments truthfully, and he doesn't care how long things take, and we become used to, as actors, doing things quickly because usually there's a continuity lady sitting behind the director going, that was 45 seconds. And you hear the, and they come in and give you a note, and really all they're saying is, do it faster please. Because they're looking at the schedule of their movie and they're thinking, okay, it's not going to work. But Roman was the opposite of that. He was like, why are you doing it like this? You would do it like this. And it would just make you do it, everything for real really, which forces you to find a truth that's what makes his work really detailed and brilliant.
And then just last year, Beginners, for which Christopher Plummer made it very clear right up through the Oscar acceptance speech that you guys were had a blast together, and
yeah.
And that his Oscar, which will hopefully, one of these days we'll get you one of yours as well. But just, I guess the main thing was that he says it wouldn't have happened without you. So it seems like you really had a ball, and to work with Christopher Plummer must be cool.
Oh, it was wonderful. The whole experience of Beginners was really special. It was a unique situation to be playing the director's story, and it heightened everything. Emotionally, it was very, very raw somehow, because I knew that Mike, who I loved to bits, he's such a wonderful man, was sitting at the monitor watching things that happened in his life, and very painful things that happened in his life, and somehow that made my job all the more important and special, and there was a sensitivity with his directing and the atmosphere he created on set and everything, which was glorious, just absolutely beautiful to work in. And we shot them as two separate movies. We shot Christopher and I's story first. We rehearsed for 4 or 5 days, me and Christopher, which involved me taking him shopping and ordering him lunch and making his bed, and it was rehearsing in a Mike Mills fashion. But God, it bonded us together, and then for the next 2.5 or 3 weeks. We just shot that story in more or less in sequence. So by the time we got to the end, where Christopher passes away, you know.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. Where Christopher's, where Hal passes away, it was devastating, you know. It was easy to play because I didn't want the film to end, and I was having such an amazing time with Christopher. I didn't want that experience to end, and anyway, we wrapped up that first film, and then we stopped, rehearsed for a week with me and Melanie, and then we shot that second part of the story as a separate film, really. And it was very different, you know, the whole styles of camera work were different. But Mike's an amazing director to work for as an actor, one of the best. And I felt like with Mike Mills, I felt for the first time really, I felt like we had a connection like I used to have with Danny. I felt for the first time there was that special. And I've worked with great directors, and I've loved working with them all. Don't mean anyone any disservice, but there was something extra special about working with Mike that reminded me of working with Danny.
So we come to 2012.
Yeah.
You have two beautiful movies, Salmon Fishing in the Yemen, and now The Impossible, which we are about to. It's going to be released to the world very soon, and I just want to ask you. You know, I guess the first thing here. How did you first hear about it, and what most appealed to you about it? There are things in there, you know, going to the other side of the world for a long time, working with kids, again, all the technical challenges of doing that project that I could see might have given you pause, but it seems like you were very drawn to it.
Yeah. I didn't have any second doubts about it. I felt like it was something very brutal about the script. There was something very spare about it, but I found it was like throwing hooks into me. It was really powerful. I didn't know quite why at the time, but some of the dialogue was unbelievable. Some of the dialogue was extraordinarily accurate or some truthful. And there was a line when our eldest son and his mum are separated from me and the other boys after the tsunami comes. And when they finally get out of the water, he sees for the first time that she has a terrible wound on the back of her leg. And there's a line of dialogue where he says, "Mum, I can't see you like that." And it stopped me in my tracks as I was reading it. I thought, it's such a powerful line of dialogue. It said so many things about that boy in that situation, about the relationship with his mother, it was just a very huge line somehow. And so I felt that in many moments in the script there was a kind of immediate, visceral response to some of the things that were written on the page. And when I found out later that it was in fact a true story, that the writer and the director had spent weeks with the real family, and these lines of dialogue were lines of dialogue that they said then, or they remember having heard being said, and I thought, well, that makes perfect sense. That's why it's got that. They're almost, you know, they're almost too good to be coming out of a writer, you know, for a writer to come up with. They are the real lines of dialogue that were spoken then, and that's quite full on. And then there was the director, Juan Antonio Bayona, whose film The Orphanage I'd seen and really liked. I thought it was a powerful first movie by any standards, and I'm always interested to work with, who with great, experienced, you know, directors, and also the new talent, the new exciting talent of which he's right up at the top of the list. So I was excited to work with him. And then thirdly, and one of the important things for me in this film was it seemed to me to be the first time in my career that I would play a father in a film about our love for our kids, the relationship, the unique relationship that we have for our wives and kids that in our immediate family. And although I must have had kids in films before, I really don't remember a movie that I've made that's really about being a parent. And albeit this is a hugely extreme situation to look at that in, but you know, I've been a dad for 16 years, and yet this is the first time I really explored that in my work, I think.
And as we said last night, there are two things without which this movie wouldn't have worked. We had to believe that this was a real family that had this strong bond that would fight for, as hard as they do to be back together.
Yeah.
And two, that you were actually in danger as a result of, that the technical stuff had to be convincing, despite the choice that was made not to use CGI.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, as the second to last question, how were those things achieved? Because that's not a given on any project.
No. Well, he made a very clever decision to only use real water. It's very hard to make CGI water look real. I mean, it can look amazing, and in a CGI type movie, it can work completely. But when you're trying to tell a real story, and in this case, it's sort of there's so many layers of that. It's historically, it's something that really happened. It's to make if we're going to make a film about this tsunami, we want the audience to experience it, to understand what it might be like. In order to understand this family's story and all of the family stories of the people who were there, then it has. If suddenly it looks like we're in fake water, you're just going to lose everybody, really. So he made a very complicated but good decision to only use real water, and I think they spent over a year trying to work out how they were going to do that. So literally all the water you see in the movie is real. And of course there's some huge wide shots, and they've taken a section of what we shot and they've replicated it so that it goes on to a bigger scale than we actually had there. But it's all real water. And how they did it was Naomi and Tom, who we follow through when the water comes, when the tsunami hits the beach there in Thailand. We follow their story until they get out of the water. And all of that was shot in a huge tank in Alicante in Spain. And they were literally on tracks under the water that pulled them through the water. They had pumps and jets shooting at them, debris thrown in, props guys and special effects guys throwing in rubber bricks and roofs and palm trees and cars. They for 6 weeks were sort of fully, and I think shooting in water is so complicated and slow. They were getting 2 or 3 shots a day. It was really slow and brutal. I think that there was Naomi says there were lots of lines of dialogue in the script for that whole section that just aren't in they couldn't do, because every time you opened your mouth to say something, you got a gallon of dirty water down your throat. So they ended up, mainly the dialogue at that point is "Mom," and "Look at us," and that's it, really. But oh my God, what he's done with it, Juan Antonio Bayona, is breathtaking in terms of his power. When the tsunami comes in the movie, you fully appreciate the horror of what it might have been like. I mean, you really do. It's not a movie anymore. It's not a movie sort of version of the tsunami. It's something very physical that you experience in the cinema watching it. We've had people passing out in screenings all over the place, and we were in San Sebastian recently, and I've seen the film 3 times. So we introduced the film, and then we went to have dinner at a hotel. Juan Antonio Bayona and I and the producer, and we were sitting eating in the cinema, next to the screening room. And as we had dinner, 3 ambulances went past the window to pull people out of the audience. I'm not meant to talk about that.
Yeah, maybe not.
Maybe not.
So finally, this must be an interesting time in your life, your career. This movie was so well received when it premiered at Toronto, this massive standing ovation. You were with the people that they seemed like they were thrilled with the job you did on it. The movie just set a record, I think, in Spain for biggest opening. You're next, I believe, we'll next see you in August Osage County, which sounds like it's going to be a huge deal.
Yeah.
So just give us your state of the union. How do you feel about things right now, and what's your outlook for the future?
Really good. I mean, I think I up until Cannes, which was in May, for the last couple of years, I thought that we were getting in real trouble in the world of cinema, in that since the financial collapse and I thought we were going downhill fast. I thought that the studio's sort of knee-jerk reaction to make less movies and to make only films that they felt that they could guarantee making their money back was leading us into a world where cinema was becoming really myopic, or it was like we're making fairy tales, or we're making vampire films, or we're making fairy tales, or we're making vampire films. And then I was asked to be a jury member in Cannes, and I was thrilled to be asked to do so, and I went there and I sat in a cinema for 12 days and watched 2 or 3 movies a day of the world's greatest movies of the last year. And I was totally turned around. I went, oh my God, look at the stories people are still telling. And that was both studio picture, American studio-backed movies, and an awful lot of European movies, but they were all uplifting. And then I went to Toronto, and I was even more further uplifted by the films I saw there. Films like Argo and Silver Linings, and the really good, interesting, sort of continuing to push the boundaries, and I loved that. Then I saw Looper, and I saw Perks of Being a Wallflower, and these are films that have all inspired me. I feel like we're in a good place now. And in terms of, I think it's hard at the moment, and I think it's hard to, to balance the career and sort of financial obligations to put my 4 children through school and college. And it's harder than it was 3 or 4 years ago. But somehow the good stuff is still there to be found, and I'm really thrilled to be working on August Osage County at the moment. It's a really wonderful, it's wonderful words. It's great writing. John Wells directing. It's a really thrilling experience, really, and it's nice to be part of that, part of this ensemble piece in the true sense of that word. And then next year's looks shaping up to be really nice. I'm making a film with. It looks like I'm going to be making a film with Wim Wenders.
Wow.
I'm making a film in Australia. I'm making a film with Peter Capaldi. And it's nice, 3 independent movies. I'm excited about all of them.
Well, thank you for this. This was great, and congratulations on all the great work lately.
Thank you very much.
Great. Appreciate it.